ritrovati al Fest. Ora parleremo di un tema che credo possa interessarvi molto, parleremo di social media. E giusto per capire quanto possiate essere interessati all'argomento, quanti di voi sono su Facebook, ad esempio? Ok. Twitter, forse qualcuno in meno, ma comunque tanti. Perfetto. Il punto è che il modo in cui parleremo ora di social media con il prossimo ospite del WNF16 è un punto di vista antropologico. E lo faremo con uno dei più importanti antropologi al mondo, Daniel Miller, dello University College di Londra, che è responsabile di un progetto di ricerca che si chiama Why We Post, di cui su Wired abbiamo parlato sul sito qualche mese fa. Daniel Miller è stato a capo di un team di 9 antropologi che ha studiato il modo in cui gli utenti utilizzano i social media in 9 paesi e soprattutto il modo in cui gli utenti hanno cambiato i social media, adattandoli alle loro necessità e ai loro usi più stringenti. Il progetto Why We Post è costituito da 11 libri e una parte online pubblicata in tutte le lingue dei paesi in cui la ricerca ha avuto luogo, compresa l'Italia, che è parte del progetto a cui è stato dedicato un libro. Non mi dilungo oltre per lasciare il palco al professor Daniel Miller. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the kind invitation. Let me start with some good news. All the things I'm going to talk about now and the results of all of this, including a university course, 130 films, all of these are going to be available in the Italian language and all for free, and it should work within a couple of weeks. So you will be able to see all this material. Now, why should an anthropologist be working on a topic like social media? The key reason is you know that every day in the papers and elsewhere, people tell you these things about social media, what they are and what they're doing. And they say, oh, you know, because of Facebook, now people don't really understand what is a proper friend. Or because of Twitter, there is a change in our attention span. All these claims are made. But we sit there and we say, really? I mean, is this true for a farmer in India because they use social media? Is this true for a factory worker in China because they use social media? So our job is to find answers to that. And the way we did it is 9 anthropologists created a team, and all of us went to different parts of the world. And the idea was each of us sits in a place for 15 months working in the local language with the local population to really try and find out how people use social media and the consequences for those people. So the various sites that we worked on, we have one in the desert of Chile, where people do copper mining. We have one, a very low-income area in Bahia, in Brazil. We have one in the island of Trinidad. I am working in some villages north of London. We have an Italian anthropologist, Elisabetta Costa, but she worked in Turkey on Mardin, which is right on the border of Syria and Turkey, a place you hear about a lot these days. And then we have a Romanian anthropologist who worked in Italy, because we like to mix things up, and he worked in Puglia in the very south. We have somebody working in Chennai in the very south of India, a place where 200,000 IT workers are next to a whole bunch of villagers. So you can work with the villagers and you can work with the IT workers. And in China, we have 2 sites. We have a site that is more traditional in terms of Chinese rural values. And we have a site, maybe you hear about all these factory workers, huge numbers of people who've worked in the factories. She is living for 15 months in one of these factories trying to find out what is going on. And basically, we have a number of principles behind our work, the main kind of ideas. One of them is now, there are many different kinds of social media. But for these people, previously, the reason they used one was probably because of cost or because of access. But now we have internet plans, we have phone plans. So now when you choose which one to use, people ask, oh, my boyfriend dumped me. But why did he do it on Facebook? Or at least something private on WhatsApp might have been better, right? So it means that these choices are now moral choices. We are judged according to how we use social media. The second point is, if you're going to study all this, we have to say, what is social media? What does the term actually mean for us, right? So the way we call it something called scalable sociality. And very quickly, what do we mean by this? We mean that 40, 50 years ago, there are two main kinds of media. There's public media, TV, radio, you say something, anybody can listen to it, right? And you have private social media, me on a telephone, or maybe it's a letter, just with one other person. Then you start to get the chat rooms, the email, that are more kind of within groups. Then you start to get what we now think of as social media, the Friendsters, the MySpaces, and then the big ones like QQ and Facebook. And in a way, they're coming down from public media. You're still broadcasting, but instead of to everybody, maybe 200 or 300 people. And then more recently, you're getting something going upwards from the sort of private messenger services, things like WeChat and WhatsApp, and maybe those are going to like a sort of 20 people that you know quite well. So as all these things develop, you're starting to get all that in-between space filled up. So that's why we call it scalable, a scale of sociality, the way people associate. So now you can choose something that fits maybe a bigger group or a smaller group or more private or less private along that scale. So give a sense of how that works. I did a study in 4 schools in England, 2,500 school children, and you can see most of them are on about 5 different sites, right? Now, if you look at the sites they use, the smallest one is Snapchat. Now, Snapchat, they take a picture, you put it under your nose, because if you make a camera picture up your nose, it's the ugliest you can be, right? And then they send it to their friends, and they say, oh, I trust you, my friend, not to send it to somebody else. Because this is often like the way they're bonding in small groups. I mean, it's changed since, but this was the main use. Then you go up to WhatsApp. You've got the WhatsApp in the class where the girls are talking about the boys are talking about the girls, or they're both talking together. You go up to Twitter. Twitter now here is used by the class. It's where they talk to each other all day, mainly saying actually pretty nasty things to each other. It's a bit shocking how people use Twitter in the classroom. Then you go up to Facebook. Now, Facebook today is used not really amongst the peers, it's more used, your family's on Facebook, your neighbors are on Facebook, maybe if you're starting to work, your work colleagues are on Facebook. And then you go up to the very top, Instagram's the only one where people are happy to have strangers. Why? Because they spend all their time making a really nice photograph with all the filters and everything, and then somebody from Estonia likes it. And it's like, wow, somebody from Estonia liked my photograph. So that's kind of great. But you can see it works as a series of different kind of layers. And the final general point I want to make is this. We tend to explain all this naturally by thinking, oh, it's to do with the nature of the platforms or the properties of the platforms. Because Twitter is 140 characters, therefore people have to use it this way. Because Facebook was designed by a corporation or the rest of it, they control the particular way it's used. Now, our project suggests that is simply not true. Actually, what you get are these ways of conversing, many of which we had before, some like memes and you, and they move from platform to platform quite happily. So the children's usage I talked about, it starts in the playground, then because BlackBerry phones are cheap, they go to BlackBerry, BBM, then in Trinidad they go to Facebook, in England they go to Twitter. Memes in Brazil might start in Orkut, then go to Facebook, then go to WhatsApp. So it's amazing how these uses pay no attention to the actual platforms. And I'll give you an example from my own life. I am addicted to email. People my age usually are, right? And email to me was important. Why? Not just my usage, but because you could see that business had always said, you know, we have to keep people at work and we mustn't let them be in touch with their families. You know, that would destroy the work environment. And we know how gradually things came up which allowed people to cross that over. So I'm probably one of many people now. I probably do more work in home and more of my personal stuff in the office, right? And we know what came into that was email followed by smartphones. So for me, that's what email did. Then I come along and start studying these children, right, at these schools. And what do they do with email? They never use it for personal things at all. They use it for school, for commercial. Words, they have used email to create exactly the boundary that I thought email had destroyed. And that's typical of what we find. You think you know what these platforms are, but people do unexpected things with it. And that's why our comparative book, which is downloadable for free, you can get it as soon as you leave this room, is not called How Did Social Media Change the World? It's called How Did the World Change Social Media? Because that's what we found. There are, however, some general things you can say. One of them is that social media has changed human communication. It used to be based mainly on oral forms or text forms, but now we use the visual to communicate. So Snapchat, that's exactly what it is. And you can see the way it evolves, right? From the likes of, like you get emoticons and emojis, and then, but a face, you can do lots more with your face than you can with those, and now people do, okay? And it becomes, all day long, you can use yourself to make a form of communication, and then that varies again with different types. So Facebook, now people often say, the papers, it's all about, oh, it's all about individual self-expression. You know, I never understood that. Even for Facebook, I didn't understand that. Because there's two kinds of photographs on Facebook. There's the ones you put up for yourself, and there's the ones you're tagged in. And which one do you want to look at most, right? Not the ones people put up, the ones they're tagged in. These are the ones that I put up for myself, and these are the ones I was tagged in. Moving on fast. They're much more interesting, but it's not self-expression. It's like somebody else dressed you in the morning to go out in the day. That is interestingly different. And then you get the other genres. You get the Twitter, where you can pretty much put any visual on Twitter. It's just got to be funny. At least it does in England. That's the way it kind of works. And then you've got Instagram with the kind of stuff that really looks good, or the stuff where somebody's been really clever and made sunburn look stylish. And each of these is its different modes. Now, the ones people keep talking to me about, and since I've got fed up with them, but I will mention them briefly, are probably the selfies and the memes. So the first thing with selfies is, again, it's all these general things made about selfies. Actually, there's many different kinds of selfies. They're the ones I just mentioned that go up on Snapchat, right? Even on Facebook, these kids use, it's not, again, individual narcissism. There are 5 times as many that show friendship, what in England you call the BFF, best friends forever, more than actually they're showing themselves. And then you've got, so you've got all these different varieties. And sometimes, actually, they're pretty serious. I wish I had more time to speak about this. But I also worked with a hospice, people who were diagnosed with terminal cancer, looking at how people use these social media. And this guy, very nice guy, worked in IT, but he was dying of cancer. He would explain to me how social media helps him because now he doesn't have to tell each individual person about what is going on with his health. He can gradually cultivate the message and then tell people. But he also said to me, you know, it's not just that. Also, by using social media, it's a way I come to acknowledge to myself what is actually going on in terms of my health, to myself. And at that time, this was his cover photo. And in a way, it's a very precise technology. It's a mirror selfie. In other words, he's actually showing this simultaneity, that he's telling you that he now feels able to show himself to the world. He was just coming out of chemotherapy. But also, he shows him seeing that for himself. So let's not dismiss these things. They can actually be quite profound and really quite important. And the same goes for the other major usage, which is the meme. Two main kinds of meme that people tend to talk about. The funny memes we probably know better. There's also a lot of serious memes, and this one from our Indian site. So a Hindu in the morning would like to start in karmic terms with good deeds, right? So they try and get up earlier than their friends so they can send out a goodwill message to other people as a proper Hindu. So you have these religious memes, and then you have all the funny memes, okay, which you're probably more familiar with. Now, we analyze these memes, and we say, actually, in a way, they're both the same, the funny ones and the serious ones. And the way we interpret them, we call these the moral police of the internet. And what we mean by that is if you look closely at what memes are doing, they're actually a way of trying to express the values that you do approve of and the values that you don't approve of. You make fun of them or the politicians or anything you don't like. And memes are important because we find a lot of people who would be a bit shy, maybe they wouldn't want to tell you directly about their opinions or write something about it. They like to share memes because it's a way they can say something about those values, show it to other people, and share in this. And that's also important because one of the amazing things about new media, for an anthropologist and I think for everybody, one of the amazing things is how quickly something that didn't even exist a few months ago, suddenly in a few months, everybody knows what is the right way to use this thing and what is the wrong way to use this thing. How do they know? It's things like this, things that control values, that tell you what is okay and what is not okay, are actually really very important. One of the other nice things about all this material, this visual material, is that, of course, you can look at thousands and thousands of images, which is great for an anthropologist. So I can say, after looking at them all, that, let's say, people in Trinidad, they really care about how they look when they're posted online. And people in England really kind of don't. Now, one of the effects of all that visual material is it turns out to be surprisingly important for another area we constantly discuss when we're talking about social media, and that is politics. And the point about what we do is, anybody can study politics on social media. You just go to Twitter. It's all there. But you think about it, it isn't all there. That's just the public stuff that is easily available. What's going on WhatsApp? What's going on beneath the surface? And the point about the anthropologists is we're the ones, we sit there for 15 months, and we are not looking for politics. The question we can answer is, for an ordinary person in that place, how much does politics actually come into their sight just on a day-to-day basis? You can judge politics. If you want to find it, you'll find it. But what about when you don't? You just want to understand the role that it plays. And one of the things we find is that in site after site, there's less politics on social media than you would expect. And we thought, okay, the obvious reason for that would be things like state surveillance, certainly in a site like Turkey or maybe China, etc. It's not actually what we found. What we found was the main reason is simply that these are social media. They're there with your friends, your family, your colleagues, and politics is often divisive. So you avoid using a topic that people will make people unhappy or unfriend you in an area that has a lot of social media. So, for example, in Turkey, it was interesting because this answered another question. People often say, is what you see on social media the same as what you would see in offline life? Perfect question. It isn't. And this is one of the reasons. Because in this part of Turkey, for example, there is a certain amount of liberalism in terms of men and women now meeting together in cafes, etc. But this does not appear on social media. Social media is much more conservative, public social media, than everyday life. Why? Because if you put a photo and there's a guy there or a woman there, it causes gossip, it might cause scandal, your family want to know who that is. Much safer to post food. Okay, food's okay, no problems, no gossip. On the other hand, at the same time, you will find that in the private social media, In something like Facebook messaging or WhatsApp, it's another world. These are societies where previously there was just no way that young men and young women could have direct communication. Everything was being watched by family and others. It's the first time they can start, as in this, sending 500 messages a day to their secret boyfriends, secret officers, and this is a significant change in what's going on. Now, one of the most important things about the whole project, the reason we set out to do this was because we find all these differences from place to place. So when I'm working in England, the English are obsessed by privacy. They say, oh, social media, it's the end of privacy. Everybody knows everything about me. The corporations know about me. My family knows about me. Everybody knows about me, right? But what about the rest of the world? I'm going to read this one out. This is a Chinese woman in these factories, and she's saying, you know, she first heard the word privacy on television, and it sounded very modern and very fashionable. Because these people, they never had a bedroom to themselves. There was no tradition on knocking on the door. There was no place that they had to themselves for a private encounter. It didn't exist. For them, going on the phones and on these media, it's the first experience of privacy they've ever had. So where in the English you're saying it's the end of privacy, these people are saying it's the beginning of privacy. And the same point can be made about almost anything. One last example. In the Brazilian case, you look at where people post, right? And they're going on Facebook, and they're a very low-income population. They tend not to post by the kind of half-built houses they actually live in. They'll post, oh, next to a gym, next to a swimming pool, something that is like shows aspiration. And this is often the way we think about social media. But you then go from there to a site like Chile, and it's exactly the opposite. Again, a low-income population, but they're trying to show their solidarity, a new kind of domestic respectability. And for them, everybody should post the same as they really are, all right? You mustn't be pretentious. You mustn't, like, look down on other people or try and pretend you're somebody that you're not, because everybody knows who you really are. So there, it's all about being relaxed and never showing the kind of things the Brazilians show. And that is what we find. For all of these questions, there's a different answer in 9 different sites. So these statements you hear every day, I'm telling you, ask yourself the question, who is it we're talking about? To conclude, I just want to say that all this material is available. We have 11 books coming out. They are all going to be open access. They are all free with UCL Press. We have a university program. The next version in English is on FutureLearn. It's going to start in 13th of June. But there's an Italian version which is also going to be available. And the website with over 100 films which show all the things that I've been talking about. Again, it's a website called Why We Post, and it will be available in Italian very soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Daniel. It was an impressive presentation. We still have a few minutes for a couple of questions. And I would ask you, the quantity and the amount of results that your research has brought is immense. And what is, in your opinion, the most surprising result you found out in the way that people use social media across these countries?
I think the thing that really struck me, actually, came from this Chinese factory. Now, this is amazing. This is 250 million people. Think of the size of Italy, right? 250 million people who've moved into this factory system in China. And the person working there, she said to me, she said, you know, there's 2 migrations going on here. One is from the countryside into the factory, and one is from offline to online. And these people, they work all day. They don't even mix with their fellow workers. They're too tired. They go online, and there they can be princesses, they can be clubbing in Shanghai, etc. So she said, you know, if you ask which of these 2 migrations took these 250 million people to the Chinese modernity they wanted to reach, it was the social media took them further than moving to the factories. And I thought that was fantastic.
And one of the main results is actually that, and I think that one shows up in all the countries you analyze, is that people, thanks to the social media, feel more connected and more socially engaged with the people. And this goes really against some of the common insights we read about social media that are making us alone, they're making us antisocial and so on. And how would you comment on that?
I think almost any question in social media has two contradictory answers. Because actually, I would not say that the only thing it does is make us more connected. We have many instances where people do, the English, for example, they started by making people more connected, and then they realized they were sorry they had done this. They didn't even like these people they were now connected with. So the main way the English use social media is now to keep people at a distance. You know, you went on holiday, you met this guy, you got to know him maybe better than you should have done. You don't want to dump him, but like you don't want to see him again. But he's on Facebook. That means that's enough. You don't have to talk to him. Your relatives are there. You don't have to invite them into your house. And actually, the Italian site was very interesting for this, the one in Puglia, because the people there, they tend to say, we're a small town. We don't need social media to feel connected to other people in the town. So they don't really use it in the way the English first used it. They use it for all the problems of relationships that don't get covered in everyday life. I mean, all sorts of interesting things. Puglia, in Italy, turns out to be an amazing site.
Yeah.
And I was saying, the book about that one is coming out in October.
And you just said the book about Italy will be out soon.
Yeah.
And we discussed some of the content that will be included there. And would you like to anticipate something about Italy?
Well, I think that, okay, one thing struck me because I'm in Milan, right? Now, when we think of Milan from London, there is one word that dominates, and the word is style, okay? You won't be unhappy to hear that, I suspect. And actually, even in Puglia, which is the other end of the country, it is remarkably true. That turned out to be actually very influential in the way people use social media, because different countries have a different attitude to how they should appear. I said, Trinidadians really care about how they appear, but it's all about individual creativity. In the English, they don't seem to care much about how. The people in the Italian side, they care that they should live up to the reputation people have for being stylish. So they actually are asking each other, you know, what is the right hairstyle to have? What is the right look to have? So it's style, but it's a much more collective notion of style. It's like style as a responsibility to the world. Totally different idea of style than you'd get in England or you get in Trinidad. And that is the kind of thing that comes with this project. Even a word that we use all the time, we realize it means different things. And in Italy, the word style means a different thing. And that not only do I say it, but you can see it when you see all the photographs that they post.
Daniel, unfortunately, our time is over, and I really would like to thank you again. It was an immense pleasure having you here. Thanks for this
I'm happy to stand outside and
conversation. And come mi diceva poco prima di salire sul palco, è ben contento di continuare la conversazione con voi fuori di qui, perché credo dovremo lasciare il palco e qualcosa stia per succedere.